and the SEC. Fellas, we might as well jump into it right off the bat. A lot of things took place tonight. Welcome with us. We're going to roll with you here for a little bit. Let's start in Columbus. We got a chance to watch what I think is the most complete team in college football. We know the White Walkers and what they're doing in Athens. Hack Sterner with the Bulldogs and that defense. We get it. I think 17 points they gave up today was the most they gave up all year. Then we know who the Roman Army is. They're real solid and real. And then here comes the Buckeyes. Tonight was the 5th game this season. They put up 50 points. They beat down the Spoilermakers, a ready Purdue team that's been knocking out giants. But Christian, where should Ohio State finish tomorrow in the rankings?
I agree with you. I think they're probably the 3rd best team. And realistically speaking, to your point, I think offensively they're the most complete team with weapons who could give Georgia a problem in terms of a matchup game if it turned into that, which I think it ultimately would turn into with Georgia. Olave, Smith and Jigba, or Jigba Smith, whatever it is, and then Garrett Wilson. I mean, those guys are really dynamic playmakers and can create a lot of problems. And when you got 3 guys like that, and they got guys that are sitting there, you got Marvin Harrison's kid, they got I think he was like the top receiver in the country last year, who's, scratching and scrapping for reps. They got a really deep receiver room, and Stroud can facilitate, and they got a really good running back. So I think from an offensive standpoint, they're the only team that can present Georgia with some.
Clint, are we now really honestly talking about a big 3? Like when the year started, we talked about the 5 families. One of them just got burnt out of their house. The other 2 kind of wobbled and fell. And now here come Ohio State. Ohio State's back. Is it the big 3 with Ohio State, Georgia, and Bama and the rest of the country, or are we not there yet?
No, I mean, I think you're probably right. No, my question is about Alabama at this point. I mean, I think Ohio State's probably, if we're being honest right now, they're probably closer to Georgia than Bama is, in my opinion. I'd probably put them at 2. I think Bama's really vulnerable, man. And we'll see what happens the rest of the season. They still got to play Arkansas. They still got to play Auburn. And they've still got to play, obviously, the SEC championship if they get there. I think Alabama's really vulnerable, and it may not take it may not take more than just if they get to the SEC championship. I don't know if they can stay on the field with Georgia. I really don't know if they can stay on the field with Georgia. So I'm hesitant to put Alabama up there, but I'm gonna ride with you just because the rest of college football from there and from 3 and down is there's a significant gap there. So I'll ride with Bama, but I would put Ohio State at 2.
Heck, I gotta roll with Clint on that. If we go back on Bama's season, Florida was on the 2-yard line and couldn't close out a 2-point conversion to beat them. LSU goes 12 rounds with them, and it's an LSU team that lost to UCLA out west. Those guys are trying to find their footing. They don't even know who their head coach is going to be next year, and they still play it within 6 to Bama. Ole Miss gets them. I mean, A&M gets them. They are more mortal than the other 2. Are you? Is Clint on to something with the Buckeyes really being 2, or are they 1A? I mean 1B.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree with you. I think, and you're to what you said, Clint, about how Bama still has some games ahead of them. I mean, Ohio State does too. They still got to play Michigan State and Michigan. And Penn State was really the only team that kind of gave Ohio State a scare, with the exception of Oregon beating them. So, that's what's so frustrating about college football right now. And like when you're sitting there talking about the 3, you have one team in Georgia who's just rolling over everybody. And like today we were worried because it was a 10-7 ball game in the second quarter, and people were firing texts, and everyone's like, oh, look at this. And then next thing you know, it's 40 whatever 17. So, but there's so many, I think there's a lot of really deep teams in both of those conferences, and teams who can come out, and it's almost more like an NFL type schedule where you could be playing a team that's the bottom of a division, but they could still beat the number one team in the division any Sunday. It's just there's a distribution of talent that I haven't seen in a long time in college football. You usually have, like we said, those 5 families that are rolling. But Alabama's in a rebuild year, right? And I don't know. It'll be interesting, dude. But there's still a lot of really good football left that could really shuffle the cards, especially even in the top 3, in my opinion.
Speaking of that rebuild year, I don't know what they're going to call it, Norman, but It is not their year. Down in Waco today, the Baylor Bears knocked out Oklahoma, which you didn't have to strain to see that. And first, respect to our man Bryce Petty. A toast to Bryce. Bryce was honored today at the Baylor game. Led the chant. I think he had his he had something retired, and his family was on the field. So, Bryce, you're the man. We love you. But Baylor came out strong. No trickery, Clint. No trickery. No onside kicks. No smoke needed. They ran the ball for 300 yards. The prodigal son got benched. Caleb Williams went in. He got benched. Rattler comes in. They yanked him back out. They put Caleb back in. Oklahoma threw everything they could at Baylor and still went home down 2 touchdowns, driving back up. What is that, I-35? That's how they get back home. So is the Big 12 done? That's how I come all the way down to it. Is the Big 12 done?
Again, G, I want to say yes, but this isn't a normal year, man. I mean, really, there's that 4 spot that's going to be up for grabs, and probably Cincinnati is going to be the most deserving for everybody other than the group that says, well, it doesn't matter, records are out the window. Who's the best 4 football teams at the end of the year? If we go through all of these different strengths of schedules and how the eye test and all the things that we talk about when we talk about the top 4, Cincinnati is a team that should probably be firmly in that 4 spot. The fact of the matter is it's a group of 5 team, and so that spot is going to be wide open. Yeah. And so I say all that to say, man, I think Oklahoma should be out. But if dominoes keep falling the way that they've fallen to this point, OU is going to be in the conversation with the Cincinnati, along with a couple of other big brand college football programs, and any of them have a chance to get in, brother. And I'm telling you, Alabama being vulnerable, like we talked about, could make this thing even more interesting in a crazy year at the top. OU. So to answer your question, no, I don't think OU's out of this thing. I don't think the College Football Playoff Committee is going to let that happen.
Ooh. Showing your cards. We are going to swing back around, Hack, on the playoffs. But, Hack, I just want to ask you, are you disappointed? Should we be disappointed in the Sooners? Or did they just do the most with what they had this season, and this is what it looked like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of saw it coming, even from week 1 with them. I think they've shown a lot of vulnerability on defense, and offensively – they haven't had that rock as the trigger man.
Razorbacks.
Yeah. hey, dog, I don't mean. We got bowl eligible last week, baby. We just got that 7th win right there. My man Pittman's on TV talking about it. Them boys went down to Tiger Stadium and got them one. Huh? Come on, baby. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
You ever seen a guy so happy about being bowl eligible, getting 7 dubs? Hey, you're looking at it, baby.
Not since I looked at Vanderbilt and Wake Forest a couple years ago doing that. Go ahead, Hack. You said they haven't had a guy that could just stand and deliver it.
No, not that they haven't had a guy who could just stand and deliver it. I just feel like when you have 2 guys who have the skill set that both those guys have, and the team hasn't been playing well enough as a whole. I'm talking offense, defense, special teams, to let a guy go in there and make some mistakes without it showing some form of vulnerability, right?
No margin for error.
Yeah, like those guys, and when you have the ability that those 2 guys have that can play, like you saw what was happening today, they shuffled them a little bit. And like everyone thought Spencer was pretty much done, and people were calling for Caleb to be in the Heisman race, and then he came out and played like a freshman a little bit today. So a typical Oklahoma team, they overcome those games. They figure something out. They run the ball really well. He gets a couple cheap ones at the end that look really good on his stat sheet, and they keep it moving. But they just haven't had that luxury this year, in my opinion, watching them. And they've shown, like I said, a lot of vulnerability, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't think they have it to go, 12 rounds with Ohio State and you start rattling off the names. I think there's 6 or 7 teams you could talk about. I think Michigan State's one of them. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of teams out there that have played football consistently and showed a certain brand that I think would present Oklahoma with a lot of problems. And I think the one thing you said is earlier when we were talking, I don't think Oklahoma's out of the water yet either. So they still got to win out. They still have to do some things to do it. And if they do that, then obviously with the tough games that everyone talked about, with Alabama still having some, and Ohio State still having some, and Michigan State still having some, and Michigan still having some, that whole top thing can be totally shifted. And that's the cool part. I mean, as a fan, I like it. Like, it's cool to watch now because it's not as predictable, but it does, create a lot of issues for those guys who are going to ultimately have to say, these are the 4 best teams, and that's what we're going to roll with in the playoffs.
Fellas, here's what I agree with you, Hack, from a standpoint of I don't think OU is one of the top 4 teams in the country. I think they're going to be given the benefit of the doubt because of who they are. And Lincoln
100%.
Riley's an absolute mess. We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when I was on with you guys. Hack, I don't know if you were on or not, but let's be honest. Lincoln Riley was hand-delivered unbelievably gifted quarterbacks that were not only talented on the field, but they were straight A alphas, brother. They walk in and take over every single room. Yep. And he was gifted 3 of them. Hey, tip of the cap to him. It
4 of them because add Caleb in recruiting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Caleb's his guy, right? I'm talking about guys that somebody else developed.
True.
When they came to him, they were grown ass men, and they knew how to handle adversity and things of that nature. And now he's got to take a guy that he recruited, and he's got to groom him, and he's got two of his dudes that are homegrown that he brought in and that he developed and was responsible for, and he's shuffling the deck at quarterback. There's nothing worse in the game of football, to me, in my opinion, than when a coach shows that he's not behind a quarterback. Now you got to make moves. Yep. Now I'm not saying you drag your feet, but in game moment when one kid struggles, you go to shuffling the deck on them, back and forth. I mean, I don't know how you were. I don't know how you guys were from a quarterback perspective.
It's over with when you do that.
I needed complete and total confidence that I could go out there and let it rip and not worry about the results to play my best ball. And I just don't think I don't think the program's healthy with him doing that at the quarterback position. So I agree with you. I don't think they're going to win out, but I think if they do, check this out, George. What do you think about this? The precedents they set with letting Oregon sit at number 3 with a loss to a sub-500 Stanford team.
Because of that quality win, though.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, hell, they had guys out for COVID. There's plenty of excuses to make for them. I get it. I understand that. But the precedents you set by allowing a team be in the top 4 from jump with a sub-500 team, a loss to a sub-500 team that's getting worse.
I see what you're saying.
Gee, Vandy is the only team in the SEC right now that's worse than Stanford, record-wise.
But let me ask you this question to your point: Oregon versus Oklahoma, and they now technically both have a loss. To me, the committee is saying, who's got the best win? Oregon on the road, crossing the country to go get, which now looks like still the best win of the year. Who's Oklahoma's best win? Scratching back to get Tulsa, scratching back to get a Texas team that got beat by Kansas today.
But
back game.
And Kansas gave them everything they could handle.
No, guys, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm not talking about. I wasn't referring to that Oregon State and the precedents being set to Oklahoma. I'm talking about to all the one-loss teams.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Like all the one-loss teams out there.
Yeah.
You can afford to go out there and shit the bed in a game and still be viewed as a top 4 team in the country, regardless of who that opponent is.
If you have a premier win, you can afford that if you have a premier win in the bank. I think that's why when you balance the books, they're still in the black.
I agree
So,
with you, because if Cincinnati slips up, I think Cincinnati is
out.
done.
But
Cincinnati also has that premier win against Notre Dame,
which looking better each game, each week they're looking better. Irish had another big win.
Anybody that's left, we can just jump to 2 weeks from now to the last game of the season. Everybody that's in the conversation that we're talking about is going to have a signature win at that point. Everybody that's in the conversation.
Wins are not created equal. My signature win and your signature. No. To Cincinnati, beating Notre Dame is a great big deal. Their program will never forget it. But for the rest of the country, Oregon going in and beating Ohio State, who was top 5, and they're back to top 5 again, and nobody came close since. Ooh, that's saying something. Hey, real quick, Clint, Dave Aranda tomorrow hires you as his agent, and he says, Clint, I want you to represent me these next 12 months. And 2 weeks from now, LSU calls you, Miami. I'm not trying to get people fired, but LSU, Miami, and USC all call you. You can win the national championship from all 3 of those places, and they've done it. If they all call you and say, hey, we'd like to get your client, Dave Aranda, on campus, ready to go in January, advise them.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up John McClain of the Houston Chronicle, NFL Hall of Fame. I know him personally. I have him on the radio all the time. He is a Baylor grad and knows everybody in the damn phone book. I'm going to call John. I'm going to say, John, let me get these boosters. Let me get these alumni on the horn, man. Give me your top 10 boosters. We're fixing to make Dave Aranda one of, or damn near, the highest paid coach in the country. We're going to get him up there in that conversation. I don't know where Dave Aranda's at right now. Because if you can do that, I'm going to go sit down with Dave Aranda. We're going to eliminate all these phone calls. We're going to eliminate everybody that's flirting with him right now. Because if he stays at Baylor, when OU leaves and Texas leaves, the Big 12 is going to be up for the taking, and it's going to be the easiest path to a possible college football playoff that any school's ever had once the Big 12 is absent of UT, Texas, and Oklahoma.
So
we're going to keep him right where he's at, and we're going to go win a title with an easy conference to get through.
He just walked into a trap, Hack. He just walked into a trap and don't know it. Christian Hackenberg, that's the Cincinnati syndrome right now. Can you win the national championship?
But it's still a Power 5, though. But it's still a Power 5.
But we're going to go into this in a little bit. I'm going to make a case that all Power 5s are not created equal. That's a Cincinnati syndrome. So when you look at that conference and the 2 big dogs are vacating, Baylor it takes over as the landlord. Oklahoma State still has a little bit of say, but it's Baylor's. And then you look across the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Middleweight, featherweight.
Listen, I think you make a great point. But I think, again, like the common theme that we've talked about just now, however long we've been on, has been how unique of a year this is. And I think if everything settles down, it may be completely different in 3 or 4 years, may not be. I can't tell the future. But what I will say is the Big 12 traditionally has the juice, it has the history, it has the pedigree, right? And even if Oklahoma and Texas leave and they go to the SEC, Big 12 still has the pedigree. And who's not to say the deck shuffles even more and they start plucking some other teams, because we don't even know what conference realignment's going to look like. If it was that easy for Texas to get up and leave and Oklahoma to get up and leave, who knows? But if as long as you're in a Power 5 and everything else starts playing out the way it is, and you win your conference, you're one of the 5 best teams in the country, and you're going to be in the conversation.
Ooh,
to me,
we're gonna circle back
under normal years.
Back on that.
I don't think. But look. Here's the deal, and we're all speculating. Hell, we don't know what they're going to do with this conference realignment. But I wouldn't be. I almost said I'd be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if the College Football Playoff Committee did this. But I think it would be the biggest, boldest move they've ever made. Is if all of a sudden, when Texas and OU go to the SEC, they start moving the goalpost to where the Big 12 doesn't mean anything. That would be a major play by the committee. And
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Move the goalpost on them? How?
Right now, you win the Big 12, you're in the dance, baby. You're square in the conversation. Odds are you're in the damn thing. Right? If you win the Big 12, if all of a sudden Texas and OU leave and the winner of the Big 12 isn't squarely in the conversation because it's a Power 5 and they won it, they're a conference champ. It's obvious the reasons, because UT and OU left. Like that's a major statement by the College Football Playoff Committee if they do that. Not that it's not. If we all sit around and go, hey, from a football perspective, it's probably more equal to the Pac-12 now than it is the Big Ten or the
Which
SEC.
it is.
No question. But you can't move the goalposts like that. I mean, that would be.
Well, here's what I personally think. When the other two leave and get settled into the SEC, we have expansion by then, because that big, massive conference, the second place team now will be in the playoff. That big, massive conference. And I don't even know how they'll do Texas and Oklahoma, if they'll both sit in the West and you bump somebody else over to the East or whatever it is. But they will expand by then. They already kind of flirted with it this year. They'll bump up to the field of 12. You see right there with Christian. Hey, if you're rolling with us, we're getting some questions popping in. We love questions. We're getting questions from all over the place. Our producer, Dagan, keeps popping them up. We got to catch up on some of this stuff. But first, we need to do our toast. Toast, or as Bryce would say, a toss. First, to the godfather of college football, Coach Corso. Sir, we love you. We respect you. We saw you went for the Rebs this morning. Coach Corso. Clint, we're going to start with you. I just saw your hand went up. I know your boys are still battling it. Your toast may not even have anything to do with Razorback lore, but we're going to start with you, sir.
Man, look, I want to give it to my boy Sam Pittman. Getting 7 dubs in the second year, breathing a little bit of life back in them hogs. But I got to be honest with you, man. I got to keep it real. Dave Aranda knocking off OU today and doing it in convincing fashion. And you talk about a guy in year 2 killing it. Were they 8-2 right now?
Yep.
I mean, 8 dubs after his first year was what his first year? COVID-19 year?
COVID, yep.
I mean, he's absolutely wrecking shop in Baylor and knocking off OU today, man. Hey, hats off, baby. That's a big dub.
Coach Aranda. Going east, Christian Hackenberg, sir.
Well, I'm going down to the SEC. Giving my man Mike Leach a shout out, down 28-3. The air raid in the SEC is alive and well. I love that guy. Probably one of the most interesting guys in college football. Always tune into his post-game pressers and midweek pressers. So hats off to him.
Wait, Hack, break down the game for those who didn't see it. Why was today such a big deal for them?
Yeah, I think that was the largest deficit that Mississippi State's ever overcame in the history of the program. They beat an Auburn team who was playing really well. They scored 33 points in the third and fourth quarter combined.
40 straight.
40 straight, and they held Auburn to 6 points in the last 2 quarters in crunch time. So defense showed up too. But like I said, hats off to Mike Leach getting that thing rolling down there. I think that's just interesting, man. I love the guy. He's funny as hell. Here's Mike Leach.
Coach Leach. And to your point, Hack, an offensive system they said would get thrown into a wood chipper if it went in the SEC. Your guys doing it. Mine is going up to South Dakota. And yeah, I'm one of those people that really wonders, why do we need 2 Dakotas? But we got 2 Dakotas. And South Dakota's 2 big teams played tonight. 1 second left on the clock. South Dakota State is winning by 3, but they leave 1 second on the clock off a kickoff because the ball goes out of bounds. University of South Dakota takes the ball from their own 40, and Carson Camp, Hail Mary, you'll see it tonight on SportsCenter, wherever you're getting your news, launches it downfield. Jeremiah Webb, Cinderella deal, knock off their arch rivals. University of South Dakota State, University of South Dakota, congrats. What a big time game that was. Now,
you really dug deep for that one right there, G. That was
had
man.
to. Yeah, I dug
Damn, that
deep.
was good.
I wanted to go all over the place, but I've been doing chalk a lot. And I thought, you know what? Let's pay those guys some attention. If you're looking for ways to skip the trip to the post office and dodge all the hectic holiday shopping traffic, like Clint Sterner, why not save time and money with Stamps.com? Stamps.com lets you compare rates, print labels, access exclusive discounts on UPS and USPS services all year long. It just makes sense, especially if your business sends more mail and packages during the holiday. Whether you're selling online or running on office or a side hustle, Stamps.com can save you so much time, money, and stress during the holidays. How? By allowing you to access all the post office, USPS shipping services you need without taking the trip and getting a discount you can't find anywhere else. Like up to 40% off USPS rates and 76% off UPS. In 2021, if you're still going to the post office instead of using Stamps.com, it's like taking the stairs instead of riding the elevator. Just going up a couple of floors. Sure, take the steps. Walking up 30 flights a day, you could use a break. And if you spend more time than a few minutes a week dealing with mail and shipping, Stamps.com is your lifesaver. You'll save so much time and money, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. So join Stamps.com, save time, save money this holiday season. Sign up with the promo code DARK, that's all caps, for After Dark Show, Phil to 12, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com like Christian Hackenberg does. Click the microphone at the top of the page and enter the code DARK, all caps, for Stamps.com. Fellas, let's go into an interesting game now. So we talk about a superpower and where they'll fit. We talked about a rising power in the Big 12 and where they're going to go. Let's go back to the Big Ten, another heavyweight round. We've been looking forward to this all fall. Hack, I'll go with you. Your boys, they fought 12 rounds. They got bested tonight by Michigan. What was your biggest takeaway, and what does it mean to the Big Ten now with the Michigan team that has one tight loss?
Yeah. Again, the same issues for Penn State have shown up, and we talked about that the last time Clint was on. But at the end of the day, they're 0-3 against top 10 teams. I think the combined loss total is like 16 points. So they fought their ass off. I give it to them, but they definitely do have some deficiencies they got to fix. Now move over to Michigan. I think this is one of the biggest wins Jim Harbaugh's had since he's been there.
In fact, that's a toast to Coach Harbaugh.
Yeah.
People have written your obituary so many different ways. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest wins Coach Harbaugh's had. He's finally in the driver's seat. Michigan's always been that letdown team towards the second half of the year. And with the gauntlet that he has here to finish, being able to survive Penn State and Michigan State 1-1 and a tight one against Michigan State, who's a damn good football team. They now have everything in front of them. It's coming down to one of the biggest rivalries in college football in Ohio State, Michigan, at I think it's the last game of the year, to ultimately have a chance to play their way into the Big Ten championship and a playoff seat. So I think it was a huge win for Harbaugh, and I think they did it. They scrapped and clawed, and they did it in a good way. They beat a damn good defense. Penn State's always had that this year. That's been kind of what they've hung their hat on, I think, as a whole unit and as a team. So, yeah, I think Michigan's got it in front of them, and they, as long as they keep handling business, they get to circle that game at the end of the year and got a chance to play their way in.
Huge. Clint, how big is this? Just like Hack alluded to in Ann Arbor, Jim Harbaugh, if nothing else, he's been game. They've been there to battle. They battled Ohio State all those years. There's not a coach in the country that doesn't wear a specific weight. And he wears two weights. Ohio State is a weight on his back. Michigan State's a weight on his back. People don't care shit else about anything else. He got close on one, lost, but he's priming up in a position to go get the other one. How big is this for him, for his staff, and for what they're trying to get done at Michigan?
I mean, it's huge, man, because, I mean, look, the fact that you probably know Harbaugh better than I do. I mean, I've just been around guys that have been around Harbaugh, and ultimately, you know, he's a dude that's a little bit quirky and does things his own way. And I think that's probably only going to go so far unless you're chalking up the big time victories along the way to justify, you know, what people have to deal with. And so I think I mean, he's done a hell of a job, but it's put up or shut up time. It's time for Harbaugh to go and win the big one and get into the big dance and exceed those, not exceed those expectations, meet those expectations.
Yep.
That they had when he took the gig. And so, you know, I don't know if Harbaugh's still that guy that the San Francisco 49ers had all the stories you hear about him rubbing people wrong, hard to deal with, and that kind of thing. But if he is, this thing better shape out well for him, and he better beat Ohio State down the stretch and get into that big dance. I know that much.
Well, here's what I do love. They do have an identity at Michigan. They have been playing great defense over the years. They commit to running the ball. They don't always have great running backs, but they always commit to running the ball, and they go late into these fights. It's 11th, 12th round. They're still going. Difference now, I think, you got a playmaker at quarterback who settled them down. Cade McNamara, he's got him on track. He can keep him paced up, and he's not a superhero. Like if you put him on a field with Rattler and Caleb, people would trample him to get to those two. But at Michigan, he's steering the ship. He's keeping them on time. The plays are he's winning off progression. He's winning with his eyes, and he's winning with accuracy, and he's really settling them down. He's tough. He's a Harbaugh type kid, and so they're going to need that going forward. They got a couple more monster games to go through, but they got to go through Columbus, or Columbus comes to them. But I like where they're at.
That's going to be fine until they lose the game, and all of a sudden that quarterback ain't going to be dynamic enough. So they better win that Ohio State game, boss.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
mean, hell, I'm looking at people hitting me up wanting to fire Kendall Briles as the offensive coordinator at Arkansas. I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? They won 7 games and are running the rock on everybody until tonight on LSU, and obviously not on Georgia. People have such a short-term memory and are such victims of the moment, man. That if that kid can play well, you know what, he can play well the entire season. And then just like Harbaugh, if they don't beat Ohio State, they don't get to that big dance,
right?
And everybody's going to turn on them.
Here comes everybody. So we're going to go into the playoff. Look, we're going to open this playoff can up here in a second, but we got a question. Fresh in from our producer, Dagan Hughes. Dagan, we got it. And it's for Clint from the Phi Gamma House at the University of Arkansas. Your girl Caitlin wants to know, if the Razorbacks were dropped into the Big 12, would they win it?
Ooh, this year? Hell yeah. Ooh. Absolutely. I mean, they got to go beat Oklahoma State?
That's that's your question. Take it, sir. That's your question, sir.
I'm thinking out loud here, man. I mean, they got to go beat up. Yeah, hell yeah. It's damn sure a conversation. Absolutely, 100%. 7 dubs right now, playing really good football, playing big boy football. Here's the deal with Arkansas right now. Arkansas can line up and play in the trenches this year with anybody in the Big 12.
That's fair.
Anybody in the Big 12.
Hack, could you disagree with that, Hack?
I would never disagree with that. So Sam Pittman, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was at North Carolina as the offensive line coach and then bounced around a little bit. So if I remember correctly, he was the offensive line coach there when one of my buddies that I grew up with, he was a couple years older than me, grew up in my county, Russell Bodine. He ended up, having a pro career and playing for a little bit, but he couldn't say a bad word about him. And the one thing, if you don't know, if you haven't listened before, the people out there, the one thing I talk about hammering Penn State is I love offensive line play and defensive line play. I love up front because it's old school. It's the grassroots of football. And that's ultimately what wins you football games. And you see it with Georgia right now. They're dominant on the defensive line. They're dominant on the offensive line. And you could bring in all the air raid, you could bring in all this flashy bullshit, but at the end of the day, if you can run the football for 4 yards every time, and defensively you can hold them under that, you're in a chance to win the game. And I love the attitude that he brought to Arkansas. And I think it's showing real early, and that's only going to get better. And I think Arkansas as a program has a little bit of that culture instilled in it historically. And I'm sure you could speak at length at that, Clint, but I feel like it's a real blue collar program. I think the mentality is such a great fit. And to your point, him doing that in the SEC with a bunch of other programs and a bunch of other guys that believe in that, and him being able to do that so early, I mean, that's massive. And I agree. I mean, I think they'd be a problem because they do that. That's how they play. They play physical. They play a blue collar brand of football. And I think you can insert that in any conference, and that's going to be successful if you do it consistently.
Look, I think that's, I mean, ultimately, if that's the difference between, let's say, all the Big 12 schools, at least recently, and your Alabamas and your Ohio States and your, that's the difference between Oklahoma getting in and getting skull drugged. Right?
Yep.
Oregon gets in, gets skull drug. Washington gets in, gets skull drug. Right? These are all like your guys that are mainstays. Clemson is one of them. They're mainstays in the college football playoffs because they're great in the trenches.
Yep.
And you got to be great in the trenches in order to compete at that level, at quote unquote championship level. And look, Arkansas is not there yet, but that gives. I think Arkansas could always move to the Big 12. Not always, but just big picture could move to the Big 12. And be competitive as hell in the top half of that conference. I think this year, with what they've got going on and everything you just mentioned, offensive and defensive line is a notch higher than it typically is at Arkansas. I absolutely think they could go over there and compete for a conference title. Absolutely. Who was that asked that question again, G?
Your girl Caitlin, who's Phi Gamma House. I think I'm saying that right. I'm just getting the notes off of Dagan here. On Arkansas's campus, a little Greek life. Asking, she wants to know. And we got another question. Hold on here, Dagan. Hold on.
Well, Caitlin, I mean, hey, look, here's to you and all you girls on campus up there. Y'all celebrate your ass off.
Live it up.
7 W's, and we're going to a bowl game. And I tell you what, us three guys, we'll all get together and we'll write y'all a little personal note. We'll get with stamps.com. And we'll print us a label, and we'll shoot y'all's little sorority up there a thank you letter for participating in our show.
Yeah. So field of 12 gear, get them all decked
get them all set
up.
Come
on now.
Rob, there you go, Rob. Right there, Rob.
Get them all. I know. I've never been a sorority girl at college, but I guarantee you that they send their parents
a lot of letters. Let's clarify. You said I've never been in a sorority girl. You mean you've never been in a sorority house?
I've never been a sorority girl.
Yeah.
Oh, never been one.
I think he's never.
Yeah.
Okay. He's never walked a mile. But
my wife is very close to her mother. I can only imagine when she's away from her, she probably would send her a lot of letters. So
sure.
I think a stamps.com account for the
that would be lovely.
And that'd be great for them to keep in touch with their parents and everything. Thank you, Kayla. I appreciate you chiming in, babe.
Kayla.
Old school, impactful. No one writes letters anymore. I mean, come on.
But they should be on stamps.com without question.
Without a doubt.
Smart, reliable, and use the access code, our access code, dark, all caps. Get your 40%. Don't play Caitlin and your girls hack. We got a little something for you from a tough Penn State downtown. This question comes to you from Zeno's Bar. You heard of Zeno's?
Yeah.
Zeno's, TJ and Mo. They're salty right now. They said if the Nittany Lions were in the ACC or the Pac-12, would they run it and be in the playoffs this year? And fellas, keep your chin up. But Hack, can you help our guys out at Zeno's?
Yeah. I think the ACC is not a question. Pac-12, I still think Oregon can present some problems. And I just say that because Joe Moorhead is there. And like you talked about, Joe Moorhead slaying Ohio State. Yeah. I think he knows Coach Franklin and his tendencies, and he knows Brent Pry for sure. So that one would present a little bit more of a challenge. But the ACC, without a doubt, I think defensively they do it. They do a good enough job, and just that East right now. I mean, they're a 6-4 team or whatever they are. but they got 4 losses. But
That you're saying without question could go to a complete other conference and come
without
through.
question, the ACC right now, this year, the ACC, without a doubt.
And the Big 12.
I think you can make that same. I think you make that same argument with what the ACC is so down this year, man. I've never seen the ACC this bad.
Right.
I don't think so. I can't remember.
What about the Clint's point? Could they also make a trip to the Big 12 and come through there? Penn State.
I think their defense keeps them in it because the Big 12 doesn't see defenses like that. I mean, they play quarters and let it bend, don't break, baby. Let's see who can score more. You know, I'm hoping something happens. You know, but I think their defense keeps them in it everywhere. I think the East is just so strong this year. It's been tough. It's been tough sledding.
So to TJ and Mo up there at Zeno's Bar at Penn State, Hackenberg is with you. Christian also wants you guys, if you're going to put your money down on Penn State going forward, bet it with Bet Rivers. Let me tell you guys a little bit about our partner at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now is the time because they're offering a $250 match bonus at your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable than ever before. With the football season kicking off, get into the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading BetRivers iOS app. TJ and Mo, we hope you guys are 21 years old or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Now let's go ahead and get into it. And I'm just going to just push this out there. You know, I believe in getting out of the box. And for the Heisman race, we've been talking about the White Walkers. I think the whole Georgia defense should be invited to New York. With their defensive coaching staff, they should all walk up there in matching suits. And 20 guys should put their hand up and hold that trophy up. In terms of the playoffs, when you watch Michigan and Michigan State come down to a one-possession game, then you watch Penn State and Michigan come down to a one-possession game. And then we're going to get a chance to see how Ohio State goes up against the state of Michigan. They also had a good little go at it with Penn State. I think there's a scenario if you come off of resumes and just talk top 4 teams, and Clint, we talked about this before we went on air, you could stand back and say out of the 2 superpower conferences, so we have a Power 5, and there's really 2 of those, 2 of the 5 are superpower. You can make a case 2 SEC teams versus 2 Big Ten teams. Let's throw the ball out there and get after it. Like if you're going to be all the way honest about it. But if we're going to keep reservations that this chair is for whoever comes out of the Pac-12 and this chair is whoever has the cleanest schedule, but not necessarily the toughest road to get there, you guys sit right here. Now, if you really just say the 4 monster programs, locker room to locker room, based on how they performed, I think it could go, it's SEC versus Big Ten. Clint?
I'm with you, boss. I think if we're, again, I hate to play this card because I hate this out, if you will, but if we're really talking right now, having a conversation about the best 4 teams in America, I think it is very possible that it could be 2 SEC teams and 2 Big Ten teams. It is very, very possible. Now, I say that with you guys already know how I feel about Oregon. I don't give a damn. I think part of being a college football playoff top 4 team in America over an entire season, part of getting in that group should be you show up every week and you handle business. Every week you handle business. You win ugly. You win when somebody's hurt. You win when COVID hits. You win. Yep. And so I'm maybe the wrong person, G, to ask that question to, because it's real easy for me to slide Oregon up out of there and tell you that Ohio State and another Big Ten team should be in there with them.
Hack, how do you see it, Hack? Could when it's all said and done, if we have some close 12-round split decision battles, Ohio State versus the state of Michigan, that takes care of the Big Ten. They'll eviscerate whoever comes from the West. Really, the championship should be done on the same conference. This is like how the Yankees and Red Sox used to be the two best teams. They had to go through each other. Or we look back how the NBA used to be so heavily weighted in the West. East didn't matter, but they still got to go through each other. How do you see that? Could the second best team in the Big Ten lay claim on the playoff?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to need some help. I mean, just realistically speaking, with the precedents like we talked about, that the committee is set with Oregon and a few of the other teams that are in there. But without a doubt, I mean, I think if you have a 2-loss Michigan that runs the table convincingly and plays Ohio State and takes them to the wire, I think it'd be really hard not to, just because of how strong that conference has been. And like we talked about just now when you asked me about Penn State, like I don't think Penn State has its problems, but I don't think that's a bad football team. And I think their defense travels, and they're kind of like middle of the pack in that. I mean, it's Michigan State, Ohio State, and then Penn State in the East. And I think Penn State would travel pretty well inter-conference across the country and present issues. So when you're talking about that, it's the closest that we've seen, I've said this before, to what the SEC deals with every year. And I don't think we've had that problem presented to us before, having to make a decision like, hey, we're going to take are we going to take the 4 best teams in college football? Well, the 2 best conferences, well, I'm not going to say conferences, but the best division, one of the best conference divisions in college football and the best conference in college football. They definitely be deserving based on strength of schedule, who they play. And if you make it out winning, like Clint said, winning ugly and having to scrap through that, you make it out with a little blemish here and there, I'd love to see them play it out, because I think in a weird year, all things considered, it would make the most sense. But like I said, I don't know if they're going to I don't know how the committee is going to do that, because they've already set some precedents.
Clint, let's just go to the committee. Let's go right with Hack is saying. They've already kind of shown they got a set of balls. They put Oregon up there at 3 after getting beat by a Stanford program that's struggling. How would they have to shape this thing to get to an SEC Big Ten playoff? How would they have to shape it? But just eye test, is that what you say there?
I missed the first part of your question, G. My buds.
Oh my gosh. Kansas beat Texas at Texas. Sorry to interrupt. 57-56.
That old delay you got. That came through 5 minutes ago, G. What kind of service you got up there, G?
I've been focused in. I just looked up. I saw that. Sorry, Clint.
You're still using them old lick the sticker stamps, man. You got to get that stamps.com.
You're right. But I lost a little bit of money on Bet Rivers tonight, messing with Texas. I thought that was my lot. Thank you for that. But I'll mail it in on stamps.com next week. Go, Clint. So, Clint, this is what I want to know from you, because you made the case. Oklahoma gets up, scraps the rest of the way out, wins the Big 12 championship. And you're right. They do have a legacy in the playoffs. I think, except for Alabama, they've been there the most. How noisy is their case? Or if Oklahoma State wins out undefeated. Now, if we're going to point to a best win, it's in front of us, because they still got to play Baylor. They got to play OU. Does the Big 12, and even though we keep dropping other programs, 4-loss teams in there and telling them that they could take it, is the Big 12 still in play for the playoffs?
Absolutely. I mean, look, you're talking about OU, who's got a lot of football left. I mean, they still got to play Oklahoma State. So they could finish up 11-1 with a conference championship, 12-1 with a conference championship. Absolutely, they're in that conversation, man. I mean, because here's what we hadn't talked about, G. I don't want to. I'll get back to the Big 12, but here's what we hadn't talked about. it's more than likely going to be a 2-loss Bama when we get down to the Final Four. And so what do you do with a 2-loss Bama at that time when you've got a 1-loss Oklahoma State or a 1-loss Oklahoma or a 1-loss Michigan State or Michigan or Ohio State? You know, how does that play into the fact? So yes, I would say that I'm just here to tell you, brother, OU is going to be in this mix if they end the season with 1 loss. They're going to be in the mix, in the thick of things.
I think realistically speaking, you make the cutoff somewhere between 8 and 10, and all of those teams
above 8 and 10. Notre Dame 8 or 9 right now.
If you're in the top 10, you have a shot right now because of the remaining schedules that are left. And I think you make a great point, Clint, about because if they put them in, that'd be the first 2-loss team they ever put in.
Yeah.
So what precedent are you setting with that, right? So if you can't take a 2-loss Alabama, and now you take Georgia, now there's really 3 spots that you're swinging, right? And like you said, so I really think if you're hanging in that top 10 with the remaining games on the schedule, if you go and look at all those teams and who they're playing, there's some of those matchups within that top 10. I think if you're in that top 10 leading up to the last couple weeks of the season here, you're in the discussion. You still got a shot.
I'm trying.
Hey, G, can I call my shot right now for OU? And I'm not an OU fan.
Let me answer Hack's point. I just had to look that up. No 2-loss team has ever been selected for the Final Four. So just to answer Hack's point, and it could be a first, but no 2-loss team has ever done it. Go ahead.
But hell, I mean, I think in LSU's championship in was it 5 or 7? They were a 2-loss football team and got to the championship game. But I know that wasn't the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm not. I wasn't talking about the college. I'm just talking about a national champion that had 2 losses.
Yeah,
I don't know how many times the hell that's happened. But
yeah, I think Bama's done that. I think LSU's done that. So that has happened. The killer part is there's 5 crowns. A couple crowns really just don't have that much weight. Pac-12. ACC, just go on and enjoy what you guys are doing before the season. But really, it's the 3 conferences and then Cincinnati. So OU comes through with its crown, and they keep trying to put so much pressure on a conference championship, a conference champion. Big Ten's in, SEC's in, here's Cincinnati, and they represent the rest of the globe that's not royalty. Here they come. But I think Oklahoma and Cincinnati, well, really, it's the Big 12. I don't really look at it as Oklahoma because Oklahoma State, an undefeated Oklahoma State, let's just run past some scenarios, versus
Oklahoma State has 1 loss. They lost to Iowa State.
Oh, so they're not undefeated.
Nope.
There are no undefeated Big 12 teams.
Nope.
No.
Oh, well, what are we talking about? I thought Oklahoma State was undefeated.
Nope.
A 2-loss Big 12 team is out. Who's the strongest case, Clint? Who's your best rep right now? A 1-loss Baylor holding up their resume versus everybody else, or a 1-loss Oklahoma? Which one can step out of the tornado alley and represent a resume that's national?
Baylor's already lost 2. The only way the Big 12 gets anybody in is if Oklahoma State or OU go undefeated the rest of the way and end with 1 loss. It's the only way.
It's on the state of Oklahoma.
It's on the state of Oklahoma. It's those 2 teams that can potentially they got enough football left ahead of them, and they can potentially finish with just one loss and a couple of quote unquote signature wins, if you will, down the stretch here.
So let me throw this to both of you because it's both of your backyards. If the state of Michigan has a 2-loss team and they both played close, they both got to play Ohio State. Ohio State gets both of them, but they get them in overtime, whichever one. That team turns and looks at an Oklahoma team that just wobbled through bar to bar to bar to bar, and here they are. What do you think the committee would do there for that 4th seed? Automatic Big 12 championship, or would they step back and say, nah, you couldn't come up north and do what these guys are doing?
I think Trevor Knight's going to stumble in and take Katy Perry up out of that joint. You know what I mean? I think that Big 12 is going to walk in and sit in that old 4 chair all day long, brethren. Ain't no doubt about it. Hey, because hey, check this out, G. We're Notre Dame, no conference affiliation. Hell, they're out because Cincinnati beat them. So that's one more. That's one more chip that's out.
Yep.
So yeah, man. I mean, I think OU, like you said, OU's gonna stumble in that bar, and Katie's gonna come off the stage, baby. She's gonna be in that 4 chair, no question about it.
Yep, that's gonna be amazing. Real quick, of the 3 programs, which is the most disappointing? Just give me something quick. Florida, Texas, or Clemson? Clint?
Texas, without a doubt. Clemson lost Trevor Knight and company. Florida lost. Trevor Lawrence. What I say, Trevor Knight again? I'm missing Trev. Trev, where you at, baby?
They lost.
Where you at? Too. Yeah, that's right. Trevor Lawrence. And then you look at Florida. Hell, they lost. I don't know, their quarterback and several first rounders. And so they got an excuse to at least take a step back. Maybe not this big, but at least take a step back. Texas ain't got no damn excuse, man. That's a crying ass shame what's going on in Austin right now.
Christian, Texas, Florida, Clemson, most disappointing this year.
I agree with Clint with Texas, but to me, it's Clemson because of the way that DJ played last year in the absence of Trevor and the expectations, the Dr. Pepper deal. They lose a barn burner to the best team. Well, I mean, not really, a defensive struggle to the best team in college football right now in Georgia week 1. And then all they had to do from that point on was win out in the ACC, which is something they had the blueprint for. Yep. And that conference is worse than it's ever been, I think, in terms of consistency with other teams. So the talent that they got down there, the facilities, the resources, everything, I think it was just a major letdown because they had their ticket. If they'd have just won out after the Georgia game, I think a lot of this playoff talk would be completely out the window.
For those of you that did not get a chance to catch it all today, Florida played Fordham. Today was Samford. Today was the SEC's active bye week. Alabama invited New Mexico State into town. Florida invited Samford in. Samford in the swamp scored 42 points in the first half. Texas has Kansas. They hold Clint tonight. They hold their homecoming. They hold their Toys for Tots rally. All the alumni teams. Anything they could commemorate that's safe to do it versus Kansas. Kansas beats them. They split with the 2 Big 12 teams going to the SEC. The Jayhawks split and had the other one on the ropes. What a ride. We got so many more questions. Damn, I wish we could get to them, but we're gonna table them. Keep hitting us up. The Field of 12 After Dark show. Clint Sterner, Christian Hackenberg, George Whitfield, and for our brothers that aren't here, Trevor Knight and Bryce Petty. We will see you guys next week.